All right, welcome back. We are on our final video here with our fidget spinner construction using Autodesk Inventor. And in fact, all we have left to do today is to assemble all of the pieces. All right, so we have the frame, kind of the main frame piece, and then we have the two centerpieces. And what we need to do is put them all together so it actually looks like a fully assembled fidget spinner. So to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the arrow down. I mean, again, there's lots of ways to do it. File, new, assembly, what have. But the thing to keep in mind is we are not making a part. The parts are the individual pieces. But when I want to take the pieces of something and make them a full item, a full assembly, I need to do that here with the assembly command. So I'm going to open a file that is an assembly. And just like the icon showed, you're going to take part pieces and assemble them in this file. Notice a couple things different. Your ribbon, it's still there, but the icons are different. Same thing with your tab. Now, some of these tab options are the same, but you'll notice a new one, assemble. And that's the one we'll focus on pretty much for the rest of the video. So under this tab, we want to place items. So picture this as like a table. Your screen here is like an empty table. So first thing you want to do is you're going to drop all your pieces on the table and then pick them up and start putting them together. So for those of you who have the icon and the word place, you're good to go. Some of you, it may say place from content center. So I need to do that for you guys there. So some of you, it may say place from content center. If that's the case, you just simply drop down, hit place. Okay. For those of you who say place, all you got to do, come up to the icon, not the drop down, the icon, and choose to place. So this command is asking you to find what parts to place. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in my fidget spinner frame. Okay. I'm going to hit open, and there it is. I'm going to zoom out a little bit because it gets up in your face there. So while your mouse is moving around, just click one time. And yeah, it turned your view a little bit, but it placed one of those on your make-believe little table we've got. Now, if I wanted to do more, I could keep clicking more of them, right? But I don't. I don't need more than one of those. So you click once, come back up to place, and you just keep doing this with all the pieces you want. So centerpiece 1, I click on that, place, centerpiece 2, place that. And then I'm going to hit right click and hit OK. Once I've done all my placing of all my parts. Now you could also just hit the escape key, that's fine. But the very first thing we need to do is, like, all these pieces right now are totally free to move around. And it's really hard to see what these constraints do when everything's freely able to move. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to right click on this piece here. It doesn't matter really which of these two pieces, but for me, I'm going to choose to restrict that piece. So I'm going to right click on that piece. I'm going to choose grounded. It's right below the halfway point. So if I choose to right click and say grounded, you'll notice now when I hover over the part, it actually gives you like this push pin icon. You can also see it in the model tree over here. That icon means I have overridden all other constraints and things, and I've just said, you know what, don't move this part. Whatever you do, if I click and move it, it doesn't work. If I click on this, it moves. Click on this, it moves. This one, I have grounded it. And you'll see why here in a little bit. So with that said, I'm going to want to assemble, say, this piece onto that piece. Well, it's kind of tricky, but we're going to go to our ribbon. We're going to go to the constrain command. There are other commands such as joint in this venture, but please do not use joint. That is not something we are ready to talk about. It is very similar to constrain, but it's not as effective. So again, go up to your ribbon, go to constrain, and you have lots of options. There's lots of ways to tie two things together. The first way, and the way we'll use more often than not, is the mate constraint. The mate constraint, just like the solutions show you, you're going to pick two surfaces those two surfaces, if I choose this first icon, it's going to take those surfaces, it's going to face them together at each other, and it's going to lock them into onto each other. I can also do this with a flush version where I have the same two surfaces, but you can kind of see the arrows. The arrows point the same direction. So there's reasons for both. But we're also I'm going to teach you one more constraint called the insert constraint. All right. For now, let's do the mate constraint, and we're going to use the mate solution. So what that looks like is it's saying, hey, what two surfaces do you want to mate together? So for us, we want this little guy right here to basically come up, and it's going to touch the bearing. Now we don't have a bearing because I don't have that modeled up yet. But I want that surface to be facing towards the fidget spinner, and it's going to be now the bearing and the frame are going to be flush to each other. So since I don't have the bearing, I'm going to choose this surface here. When I choose that surface, notice, go ahead and hit OK. Notice that it slammed the fidget spinner down on my centerpiece, right? Because remember, I told this thing, don't let the centerpiece move. So right now, I can still freely move my fidget spinner center, like my main frame piece. Notice very carefully though, if I get to the right angle, you'll notice that no matter what I'm doing and moving, it's always, always, always keeping that surface flush, right? I cannot pull the fidget spinner main frame piece away from that surface. Okay, next thing I'm going to do then is, all right, I know that those two surfaces are lined up in a way that they're in the right spot, but clearly I want like the center part of my centerpiece and the center of my fidget spinner frame. I want the axis through those to like be on top of each other. So watch this. I'm going to go to constrain, and this time I'm going to choose a rounded surface. When I do that, see how I get that green center line? That's what I want. I want to choose that because I want that center line. And if I come over here, notice here, I get that same green center line. I want those two center lines on top of each other. So go ahead and click on that. So by clicking on each piece's center line, I told Autodesk, hey, make sure that those two are quote unquote mated by keeping them on top of each other. Check out what happened. If I click and try and move this, I have a real life fidget spinner. Remember, I'm just simply saying keep this surface here and this surface down here together. Don't let it pop out and fall off on the ground. But I'm also saying, hey, keep the axis of my frame and the axis of my centerpiece aligned with each other. Okay, now all we got to do is we got to take this last piece. Notice it's completely free moving. We want to lock this guy into the opening of the other centerpiece. So let's go to constrain. And this time, I could do the same thing. I could choose this surface and say this surface, right? Because eventually I would push that one into my other centerpiece. I would then have to go back and ask to align the axis of this centerpiece, align it with the centerpiece of the center line of the other one. But I want to show you a shortcut. If I go to the insert constraint, I believe I mentioned this when we first started the constraint command. The insert constraint does both of those at the same time. An insert constraint says what surface and what axis do you want lined up, and I'll do them both at the same time. So with this insert constraint started, I'm going to come up and I'm going to say, I know that this surface ring right here, which really represents that whole flat surface, but that ring and axis, I'm going to choose that. I want that to be exactly on top of that ring, which is really that whole surface, and that axis right here. So when I choose that and hit OK, notice that it is no longer able to move. I can't move it this way. Now, if I had like a chunk missing, you would be able to see, but I am actually spinning the part. You just really can't see because it's a flat, colorless surface. So at this point, I have piece 1 locked in place. Piece 2 is inserted into piece 1. And then I have the actual fidget itself able to spin around itself. All right, there you go. Make sure, you should have done this way sooner. I'm sorry I didn't remind you, but Control S, we want to make sure we save that thing. Drop that menu down to your D drive, your E drive, whatever your flash drive, removable drive is. Open up your fidget spinner folder and change the name to something obvious, because again, you don't get to see a picture of it when you're in the files. So fidget spinner assembly, probably the most obvious one, right? There you go. Hit save. Oh, if this ever comes up, it's asking about dependent files. You can always just hit the OK. For what we are doing, it will never be a problem. Just hit the OK or the yes, but then it is saved. So you are good to go. You have yourself a nice fidget spinner that spins around, and I don't know. We can get crazy. We can actually animate that, but we'll worry about that later. So anyways, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed our fidget spinner, and we'll see you next time.